Amina walks barefoot at dawn, the road a hot vein of dust under her feet, the sky already a hard white. She holds Kofi close under a thin blue wrapper, the cloth rubbing her cheek like a promise. The wrapper is old, stitched by her mother from a scrap of a dress that glowed once at a wedding. Now it smells of smoke and river mud. Ahead, the highway hums with metal and diesel. A giant truck barrels by. Its wheels throw a wall of grit and a horn rips the morning. Amina freezes, breath gone, the boy coughing wet against her chest. She can turn back to Bole village, where the well tastes wrong and the chief shrugs, or she can follow the road to Accra and ask for help she has never known how to ask. She chooses the road and presses the wrapper like a shield to her son's face. By the second hour, the dust paints her lips the color of old paper. The road climbs, and the heat draws sweat from her arms into the worn cotton. Every step is a small fight. Kofi's breathing thuds in rhythm with her heart. She tastes salt and grease when she coughs. A cheerless house stands beside the road, a shed for tired drivers, where a boy with a shaved head offers water in a dented cup, but even that water makes Kofi cough louder. The wrapping around her waist, the blue cloth, flutters when vehicles pass, billowing like a small wounded flag. Amina tightens it, and the wind answers with a smell of sweet oil from the city, a smell she has never smelled close before. The first obstacle is the police checkpoint an hour outside Kumasi. Uniformed men lean on their rifles in the shade. They wave vehicles through and ask questions of everyone who walks or rides. They ask for permits Amina does not have. They ask for money she does not have. A tall officer with a scar on his cheek calls Kofi a strong boy and demands that she pay 50 cedis for walking the highway. When Amina hands him the last koi, hands tucked in a tin, the knife of shame cuts inside her. He laughs and says, "That's not enough for a sick child." He points toward the bus stop where a bus is leaving for Accra. The choice feels like a new stone: stand and bargain, or run across the tar and join the bus that smells of sweat and biscuit crumbs. She runs. Inside the bus, bodies fold like paper. The driver's voice is low, the engine a drum. Amina holds Kofi. He sleeps in the middle of a cough that raspers like a small river. The bus breaks down at a bridge over the white Volta. Men push and shout. The river below churns with brown water and slivers of plastic. Amina watches the river and remembers the taste of the village well. The bus repair takes hours. In the heat, the sky blinks with distant thunder and a woman sells boiled ground nuts from a tray. The second obstacle loosens a new fear. Long delays mean doctors will sit with cupfuls of questions. They will need tests and money. The bus driver offers a ride for less if she hands over the wrapper. "Worn cloth makes a good kerchief," he says, smiling like a scavenger. Amina presses her hands to the fabric and keeps it. The wrapper is now a stubborn promise. In Accra, the air changes to a slick sweetness, and the high masts of cranes line the horizon. Traffic forms a river of glass and steel. The city sounds like a choir of warning horns and a throat full of engines. A tall building glints across the road, one of Kwame Bediako's towers, its name in brass that stares down at the street. Amina thinks of that brass like a second sun. She carries Kofi into the crowd outside a general hospital. Inside, the scent of cleaning fluid and metal cuts her. Nurses move like fast birds. They lead her to a clinic door that reads outpatient, but a sign says no cash, no service. A man at a phone booth tells her there's a free clinic across town once a week and points, then shrugs. The third obstacle is the hospital bureaucracy. Forms, stamps, a long queue, and hands that shake their heads. At the clinic, a woman in a white coat kneels to listen to Kofi's chest and frowns. Dr. Nia Mensa touches his lips and then reaches for a stethoscope, and the tool is cold against a child's ribs. She asks where the child drinks water and what his stools look like. Amina says the well near the cassava mill, the one where the factory pumps pipes into the river. The doctor's eyes narrow. "You came far," she says, and pulls Kofi's shirt up. The machine that measures oxygen beeps in slow concern. She writes tests and then tells Amina there will be fees for the lab. Amina cannot pay. The doctor sits back and reaches for a pamphlet about environmental toxins that fall from the hospital's notice board. The pamphlet has a logo, Bediako Industries. For a beat, the world tilts. The fourth obstacle is a paper, a printed map, and a name that turns help into blame. Amina walks the city streets with a list of clinic names and the wrapper heavy on her shoulders like a wet cloak. She watches a tall black car cut through traffic, leaving a ribbon of cool air. Kwame Bediako steps out, a clean line of suit and sunglasses, and the crowd parts. Amina feels anger like heat. When his convoy crosses her path, a mud splatter from an SUV paints a smear on her wrapper, like an accusation. At a market stall, a man pushes her and the wrapper slips, revealing a small brass comb tucked inside. The comb is rusty, a family relic from Rashid, her husband, who died before Kofi's birth. The comb drops, and a child kicks it away. Amina bends, picks it up, and thinks the comb should mean more than grief. She follows the convoy with the smallness of a plan. The city opens a theater of small disappointments, clinics with locked doors, a pharmacist who shakes her head, an NGO worker who promises later, and then later does not come. Each blocked alley tightens her fists. The fifth obstacle appears at the RE, Verbank where Bediako Industries sits, a low chain-link fence. Chimneys that spill a light gray ribbon into the sky, the scent of machine oil as strong as rotten fruit. Workers in navy shirts move like ants. A sign claims the company brings jobs and clean water to communities. Amina sees pipes descending to the water and catches the air again like a net. A man in a hard hat tells her to move on when she asks about a chemical smell in the river. He says the tests are within limits. Amina's heart knocks against her ribs like a trapped bird. Kofi's cough is a small, sharp bell. She wants to scream, but instead she ties the wrapper tighter, a band of blue that refuses to be torn. At the midpoint, everything flips like a drumbeat. Dr. Nia calls Amina and says the lab results are ready. Amina hurries across town, her steps loud like she can wake the whole place. The doctor looks up with tired eyes and slides a sheet across the desk. The tests show heavy metals in Kofi's blood, mercury and something the machine calls industrial alkaloids. The doctor explains slowly, the levels are high, these poisons act on tiny lungs and small livers. The child will need special treatment and tests, and possibly a long hospital stay. Amina feels both relief and new hurt. Relief because she finally has a name for the pain, and hurt because that name points to a factory where chimneys cough and tanks hiss. She looks at the paper, and then out the window to the line of cranes, and realizes the problem is not just a sickness, but a story of power. The man whose cars cross her path is not only a figure of wealth, he is part of the poison. Help and harm wear the same suit. Word moves faster now than her legs. Amina sits in on a meeting of a small group of mothers near the clinic who wash at the river and complain of rashes and coughing children. A young woman, Lindewi, talks about a whistleblower who worked on the plant's treatment line and left a USB of internal tests that showed dumping at night. Lindewi's hands tremble. She is barely 25, and she gives Amina a paper with a phone number and the name of a regulator. The group plans to go to a town meeting in 3 days to ask the company for clean water, and they invite Amina to speak. The city is full of cameras now and hands that reach for stories. The truth slips like water into cracks and makes everything tremble. Amina feels a new plan growing, to speak in public, where voices can break the shields of brass letters. On the day of the town meeting, thick clouds press low as if the sky knows its part in the play. A stage stands with a banner reading Community Partnership. Bright logos and smiling faces in glossy brochures show handshakes and children drinking water. Kwame Bediako arrives in a polished car, his smile practiced, the crowd clapping. He speaks about responsibility and charity and hands out clean bottles with his company name printed like a halo. The event smells of grilled plantain and diesel. Amina waits behind a fabric partition, the wrapping around her shoulders sagging with sweat. Kofi is coughing in her arms. She watches the billionaire shake hands and perform apologies like a trained actor. The company has lawyers and singers and a camera crew that spins everything into a good story. The midpoint twist sits like a seed. She realizes that the public show is a mask and that the wealth that built the mask may also have built the harm. When she steps onto the stage, her hands shake so that the wrapper trembles like a small flag on a hill. People look, and the sea. Loud silences like a curtain dropping. A woman in a velvet dress, one of the company's PR, sighs in annoyance, but Kwame watches with a face that does not give away the weather behind it. Amina's voice comes small and steady. She tells them where she came from. She names the well. She tells them about the tests and the baby's blood and the way his breath catches like a bird with a broken wing. Gasps move through the crowd, the warm day suddenly sharp. Kwame's smile thins. His lawyer whispers, and the camera switches from the singer to the small woman with the worn blue wrapper. A silent, hot thing opens in the air. Someone's phone picks up her words and a live stream begins. The obstruction rises like a second wall. The company offers a check and an air of pity. "We will help you," a smooth voice says from a podium, and a director reaches for a folder. Kwame steps down and offers to take Kofi to a better hospital, to fund care in private clinics with closed doors. He talks about community support and compassion projects. His words sound like polished shells. Amina sees then that money is a net that could catch nothing of the truth. Will she take the money and buy medicines in silence, or will she shout until something breaks? This decision is a blade between her ribs. The crowd waits for her to bless the bail, to smooth the rough edges of power. But there is more now than a child's face and a check. There is a USB that Lindiwe clutches and believes in. There are the files with data. There are mothers who have lost children already. Amina chooses to refuse the check. "We need clean water," she says, and her voice carries like a bell. "We need the truth." Her refusal changes the mood. A slick man in a dark suit approaches her with a hand extended and a small envelope. A photographer clicks. "Sign this," he says quietly, and the envelope looks thin as a match. "Positivity," he adds, but Amina shakes her head, and in that moment Kofi's cough turns worse, and he clutches at her wrapper as if gripping a lifeline. The sixth obstacle falls like a storm, the loss of time. Kofi goes into spasms, and a nearby nurse pushes through the crowd and yanks him toward the ambulance. Amina goes with him, shouting the hospital name, chasing the sound of his wheeze into a corridor that smells of bleach and fear. Kofi's eyes flicker and the monitor shows a slow slide. She calls for the doctor and hears the list of tests and the long faces. For the first time, the crowd is outside the glass. Inside it is a small room with bright lights and cold metal. At roughly 70%, a crisis bites. Kofi dies. Light in the machine flattens and the breathing stops like a small drum that's been struck and left silent. Amina cradles him as if time has folded into her hands. The wrapper smells of salt and river mud, and now, 2 breaths later, it holds the small shape of everything she has loved. The hospital room seems far too white, the day too loud with buzzing air. The doctors murmur words that mean nothing, and the nurse covers his face with a small sheet and says sorry in a voice that is all gentleness. Amina sits on the chair and does nothing. The loss hollows her like a drum. Friends and mothers in the town meeting wait for the magic of the billionaire's check, unaware the child's beating stopped, unaware that the choice she made to refuse the hush now sits like a stone on her chest. In the hours that follow, grief is a river she cannot bridge. People bring food. The chief from Bole arrives, his shoes still caked with mud, and he blinks like he has woken from a dream. Lindewe places the USB in Amina's hand and says, "You have to show them." Amina looks at the small black rectangle, and its weight is a new kind of responsibility. The story shifts inside her like a storm in the river. She could bury Kofi at dawn and go home with nothing changed, or she could make his death count. The hard choice is made in the sleepless hour. She chooses the fight. What follows is a sequence of confrontations and growing spectacle. The public reveal must be planned with care. Lindewe brings a man named Inspector Thabo Maseko, an official with a jaw like a hammer who says his hands have been tied but his heart has not. He brings a camera and a legal notebook. They round up other mothers who lost children, and Dr. Nia offers a statement. They arrange a press conference at the square by the river, the same river that carries secrets downstream. Meanwhile, Kwame mobilizes lawyers, PR teams, and paid protesters who chant about jobs lost and stability. The company erects a stage and hands out brochures with smiling children and bottled water. The city sparkles with both narrative and counter-narrative. The media come hungry. The small blue wrapper that draped Amina's shoulders now sits folded on a table, a token of the past and the present. On the day of the reveal, the sky is heavy and the crowd swells. Television cameras heat the air with their lights. Kwame stands tall on a stage first, his voice measured, a script rehearsed to precision. He offers condolences and a fund, and the crowd sees a man who appears to care. Then Amina steps forward with a USB in her hand and the wrapper tied around her head like a crown of memory. She asks for the projector, and in that moment watches the world she built from silence become a lens. The screen fills with documents, internal memos, nightly discharge logs, photos of pipes, and a lab table that shows rising heavy metals in well samples. Lindewe's face appears on video, her voice captured when she still dared to speak at nights. The crowd leans in. A woman in the back says, "Show the date." The files show dates aligned with sickness records. The projector's light cuts the dust and makes truth visible in a way that no standard press release had ever managed. The spectacle is raw. People gasp, some cry, and some cover their mouths. An unexpected witness changes everything. A chauffeur named Kwaku, who had once driven a truck for Bediako Industries, steps forward holding a battered notebook he swears he forgot to sell. He says he saw barrels moved at night, saw men take water samples and swap them for clean bottles to fool inspectors. His voice shakes, but it is plain and full of the kind of detail that law likes. A former engineer, clutching a faded hard hat, takes the mic and tells of slowed filters and cut corners because efficiency mattered more than people. These witnesses are like matches lighting tinder. The press amplifies every word. Social media catches fire and the city's screens repeat the same videos until even those in the far markets have seen the smoke rise. The billionaire's smile wobbles. People begin to chant the child's name, Kofi, like a small drumbeat of mourning and accusation. The antagonist tries to claw back control. Lawyers file restraining orders and the company's bank freezes certain accounts. Kwame holds a press conference to assert that his company meets all legal standards and that any deaths are tragic but unrelated. He offers donations to the clinic that looks like a benevolent actor who also refuses to admit guilt. The board in his glass building circulates statements about independent audits. But power has a strange weakness. It fears a camera with the right footage. Dr. Nia posts a stream of lab results and a timeline, and the regulator, under pressure, opens a formal investigation. Inspector Thabo, who has children of his own and a reputation for being straight-backed, leans into his role and sends for warrants. The public outrage becomes law in motion. The company that had been a tower of brass finds itself in a tangle of subpoenas, and the golden letters on the building begin to mean less than the sound of shovels at graves. In a dramatic second climax, a public probe presents evidence on live television. The prosecutor reads the findings: falsified reports, night discharges, missing safety checks, and directives from upper management that prioritized profit. Board members look pale in the courtroom where the public watches on the square's large screens. Kwame sits at the front table, his expensive suit a dull fabric against the legal papers stacked like accusation. He tries to blame contractors and rogue employees, but video clips show him in meetings where a pricing model for water treatment cuts hours and saves money at the cost of filtration. The cameras catch the flush of his jaw. The crowd outside the courthouse presses forward like tides. His title becomes small as the wooden bench of the magistrate declares temporary suspension of his operations and a freeze on executive package. Why? The sound of the gavel snaps like a drumskin in the rain. Another climax follows with a spectacle of accountability. Regulators move in with clamps and sealed documents, and the factory is ordered to halt operations. Protesters spill salt into the street like a slow fall of snow. People who once sold grilled corn outside the factory now hold signs that say, "Clean water for Bole." A surprising ally appears. Chief Jallo of Bole arrives with a band of elders and the names of every child who fell ill over the past 5 years. Elders' stern faces are a language that matters to courts and to the city's sensible voices. The inspector reads the list into the record. The crowd chants a litany of the names until the city is full of them. Under pressure, the board strips Kwame of his executive power pending investigation. He is forced to step down as CEO and a special administrator is installed. Reporters ask if this is justice. Mothers cry and clap and sing. The wrapper Amina wore is displayed on a table now, a small flag that once protected one child and now stands for many. Kwame cannot buy back the night air or Kofi's breath. He stands in front of a camera outside the courthouse and looks like a man who has been cut from his title. For a moment he watches the mothers and their faces, and something like a shadow of regret moves through him. But the spectacle demands more than regret. The city demands change. A plan is announced for an independent cleanup, for new pipes and filters, and for a community oversight committee. The company is ordered to fund wells and clinics with independent auditors. The regulator's punishment includes criminal inquiries into willful negligence. The court hears testimony for months, and the narrative of quiet corners becomes public like a river rerouted. The antagonist is stripped of power in a way that feels both late and necessary. 6 months later, the big change looks like small daily miracles. New wells stand in Bole with green pumps that smell of oil but produce clear water that tastes like rain. A new clinic, modest yet bright, opens by the river, and a blue banner hangs above its door. Amina's wrapper is now stitched into the ribbon that decorates the entrance. Children no longer clutch their bellies after scooping water. The regulator places monitors along the banks, and a local committee keeps watch, and the people are taught how to read the numbers printed on test results and to demand transparency. Amina is not alone anymore. Mothers show up with notebooks and cameras. Lindiwe trains more whistleblowers and moves now with less fear. The factory is different, run by new administrators and inspected weekly. Kwame is out of the CEO suit and moves less in public, sometimes visiting under supervision. Some say he repents. Some say he is reshuffling his fortune. That debate beats like a steady drum in market corners, but the river's taste has changed. Amina's life after Kofi is both tenderness and grief. She wakes with the sharpness of his small hands, and then, like the sun, she returns to steady duty. She teaches other mothers how to test water and how to demand records. She sits at the clinic's door and greets families, her voice gentle as she tells the story of a child who taught a town to watch. The wrapper, now part of the ribbon, flutters in the wind when the sun warms the clinic's roof. People bring seeds and tools for a memorial garden where Kofi is remembered by the name of a tree planted in his honor. The clinic posts a small plaque that reads, "For Kofi and all children." Amina sometimes touches the brass letters and thinks of the man who once passed in a clean car and then fell from power. She does not know if justice will always last, but she sees the wells and the clean water and knows that a single set of footsteps can change the current. The city learns to balance its appetite for growth with the weight of its people. The new laws that regulators helped push through require transparent reporting, community councils, and public access to environmental tests. Children in school learn about the river and how to keep it safe. The fighting is not over. Lawsuits linger, some men keep their old guard, and time will tell how deep the change is. But there are mornings when Amina walks the riverbank and hears children laughing and not coughing. She bends to scoop water and tastes a thin, honest river. She lays her hand on the wrapper ribbon and remembers the day she chose the road and then the stage. In those quiet minutes, she understands that grief poured into work can make something else grow. Months later in the square where the great banners once billowed, people gather for the unveiling of a small sundial erected near the clinic. The pattern on the wrapper is sewn into its base. Amina stands by the sundial and places a small brass comb, Rashid's comb, into the soil beside it, and a child pours water from the new well. The comb sinks and the wrapper flutters like a banner. A new nurse, a woman who was once in Dr. Nia's class, ties a bit of blue fabric to a fence and laughs with the mothers. The cameras take pictures not to sell a story, but to mark the beginning, the first official day where the town celebrates both the living and the lost. People eat sweet plantain and speak names out loud. This is the symbolic payoff, a small, public thing that says the river belongs to everyone, and that a wrapper held close can become a ribbon on a new door. Moral. Courage that refuses silence can turn private grief into public change. Will you stand with Amina? If this moved you, please share the story gently, subscribe for more tales, and tell someone who can help change lives. The screen flickers back to life, and the dawn in Kumasi, now a city of quiet cranes and hopeful whispers, feels different, as if the interval itself pressed a different pressure on the air. In a glass-walled office overlooking the river, a woman with a quiet smile and steel in her eyes studies Amina's USB drive, and the caption on the desk reads, "Bright River Foundation, founded not to own the truth, but to fund the truth when the truth asks for witnesses." She speaks softly into a phone, saying, "Let the cameras see the doors we unlock, not the doors we close." And the line goes dead still as she leans back and nods toward a folder labeled Independent Oversight. Meanwhile, the street hum remains, Danfo horns threading through morning talk, and a vendor shouts about fresh plantains while a bus coughs and shudders at the bridge, all the sounds of a city that has learned to wait and then act. Amina's first breath after Kofi's death tastes like rain on river dust, and a single idea now anchors her. If the interval has shown that wealth can be used to reveal, then wealth must be used to repair, not to bury, and she feels the wrapped blue cloth against her cheek like a weathered map that has learned to guide rather than shield. The interval beat itself quiet for a heartbeat, and then the world unlocks anew. Lindiwe appears on the edge of a crowd gathered near the riverfront, a compact woman with a notebook and a resolve that makes the air feel heavier, and she says, "Maya Ofori is listening," and Amina realizes the hidden billionaire behind the town's new dawn has stepped into the light, not to own the light, but to share it. And that hint of mercy shifts the pace from protest to plan. The next moment shifts again as Chief Jallo steps from a side street into the square, not with the weight of a ruler, but with the weight of a witness. his hat in his hands, saying he has brought me's and dates of people who could no longer stay quiet. And with that signal, the crowd shifts from waiting to weighing, from anger to action, and the pulse of the day centers on a small doorway where a press conference is being prepared, a tent of blue and white banners fluttering like sails, and Amina stands at the back with the wrapper tight around her shoulders, the same shade of blue that once shielded Kofi, the same shade that now might shield truth from fear. The interval ends with a question that stabs at her breath. Who truly owns this town's future? The distant billionaire with a philanthropic smile, or the mothers who have learned to read the numbers and to demand the maps of their own rivers? The answer begins, not with a speech, but with a move. Maya asks Amina to join her at the podium, a symbol that the shield has become a link. And Amina steps forward and hears the breath of the crowd, the soft hiss of cameras, the murmur of children, the snap of a microphone warming up, and promises herself to speak not for Kofi, but for every child who will drink clean water tomorrow if they can hold a line against the old temptations of power. The first micro-cliffhanger lands as a question from Maya. Will you tell the truth even when the truth costs you something you never imagined you would pay? Amina's eyes drift to the river where the old pipes murmur and the new wells gleam in the distance, and she tightens the wrapper as if tying herself to a new oath. The second beat lands when Lindaway steps in with a USB drive that she swears is the rest of the story. Full test results, nighttime discharge notes, and a ledger that ties the plant's times to the company's quarterly reports. And the trio around the podium realizes they are not merely asking for a better future. They are mapping the path toward a courtroom of everyday life where the city will be counted and held to account. The town meeting becomes a live ledger, with Maya speaking first in a voice both calm and forceful. We will fund what the regulators require, but we will not pretend that a ceremony cures a river. Then Amina speaks, her voice steadier than the tremor in her hands, telling the gathered faces where Kofi would have learned to drink water, where the old well's taste had begun to turn to something sharp, where the hospital's white coats had met the factory's gray smile, and she names the days and the nights when the data was faked and the filters were slowed, and she speaks the truth not as accusation but as a map toward justice. The words arriving like steady rain, washing away a suspicion that someone could have done more, and in that moment she feels the people lean closer, not to hear anger, but to hear the plan that will keep anger from becoming revenge. The interval's tension crystallizes into a single, clear deadline. Within 60 days, the Foundation will publish an independent audit, appoint a community-led oversight council, and fund the first phase of a new water system: pipes, pumps, meters, and a public dashboard that anyone can read, so that the town's numbers will be legible to every child and adult, not hidden behind executive gloss. And Maya's presence at the podium, the quiet billionaire with the loud promise, gives the crowd a reason to believe that change can be arranged by people who listen and by money that serves rather than hides. The mid-paragraph turning point arrives with a hard edge. Kwame's old guard circles the square in a low-slung convoy, and a lawyer's voice cuts through the noise with a warning that the new oversight could threaten the stock price, that government partnerships have strings, and that a foundation that asks for transparency might also demand more than a few political favors. The camera catches Kwame's face in that moment, pale and wary, as if the weight of his empire suddenly feels measured against the open sky of a public square, and the crowd's mood shifts from righteous anger to cautious hope because they can see the risk in ambition and the risk in silence at the same time. The scene sharpens when a small, almost whispered detail becomes a loud hinge. A steward in Maya's entourage reveals a ledger entry, the Bright River Foundation's first grant, earmarked for public health equity and environmental restoration, lists a donor name that many believe to be fictional, but is now read aloud by a regulator who has a smile that's not cruel, but that doesn't forget the formality of law. The name is not anonymous, and the donor's known identity places the town's healing in a wider map of global finance, but it also anchors the town's claim that the money was never a mystery but a mandate to keep the river alive and the people alive at the same time. The next pivot comes when the audience sees an unexpected transformation. Kwame, once the master of appearances, must endure the new scrutiny, and his initial instinct to counter with a thunder of apologies and promises slides into a more awkward moment when he realizes that the crowd's eyes have learned to see through the gloss. A veteran reporter asks him to explain the night discharge records, to explain those within limits phrases that never quite match the river's voice, and the room holds, breath by breath, as Kwame tries to spin and then stops, a man who has learned that spin cannot outrun the truth forever. The interval's echo lands again in Amina's lap. The USB, now a symbol of public memory, is passed from hand to hand, and someone says, "This device can indict without a courtroom if it's shown honestly." And Maya nods as if to say, "Let the court be the street and the street be the court." The town's fight is becoming a treaty between neighbors and a foundation that believes in accountability more than in applause. The closing beat returns to the river's edge, where the blue wrapper now hangs from a post like a flag of a new era, and the air smells of rain and metal-polished hope. Amina steps away from the microphone. She looks into the river's long, dark line and sees not only the reflection of a girl with a child's breath in her arms, but the reflection of 100 mothers who have learned to trace the data on the dashboard. And she knows that the interval's gift is not merely evidence, but momentum, not merely a public confession, but a shared vow. The town is no longer waiting for a miracle, but building a structure for it, with Maya's money as ballast and the community's stubborn courage as the keel. And as the sun fully lifts over the cranes, a small leaf of a plan unfurls in Amina's pocket, a charter for the Oversight Council, a call for local inspectors, a timetable for weekly water tests, and the wrapper's blue threads catch the light and become a thread in the new seam of the city's life, and the camera pulls back to show the river's glass and the people's faces, some hopeful, some wary, all listening. Kwame's shadow recedes behind a line of trees, his power not erased but retied to rules that do not bend easily, and the episode ends on a note of shared weather, a rain-washed dawn, the first clean taste of water on a child's tongue, a plaque that mentions Kofi and every child who will drink again, and a final image of Amina's hands, steady over the wrapper, lowering the flag of mourning into the soil as the slow, patient engine of justice begins to turn, promising that this restart, this interval, has not just broken the silence but opened a door through which the town will walk, step by step, toward a future where wealth and care are not enemies but partners in healing the river and its people. The last breath of the paragraph lands on a line spoken softly by a child somewhere in the crowd, a line that becomes the bridge to what comes next. We will watch, we will wait, we will work, and we will not turn away from the truth. The last 2 or 3 sentences are intact. The wrapper is no longer a shield but a banner, and the river's new taste is proof that courage, when joined with money that knows its duty, can turn private grief into public repair. This is the dawn that returns when the interval ends, and the next cut will move the story forward toward the moment when the oversights become a daily habit and the town learns to trust again.